teacher. I've never worked in schools. And when supporting our students, I think it became very important to understand what environments our students were coming from and what environments they're going to be going into. We wanted to understand the conditions of the communities and the workplaces, but also develop an understanding of what the workplaces needed in terms of teachers. What were their characteristics that they wanted? What was the disposition and what kind of motivation did they want as well? Within this presentation, I feel like it's really easy to slip into a negative mindset, but both Shereena and I really want people to look at all the information that we're giving and look at it from an opportunity mindset. So even though some of these issues are persisting and they have been well known throughout school systems for years and years and years, we do want to say that look at this with within your capacities in a frame and look at it from a frame of mind of, okay, these are the opportunities that we have to improve. So unfortunately, we had so much information, we can't go through it all, but I'll let Shereena expand on some of the event-specific information that we got.
Yeah, so it's so easy to like have a native teacher preparation program and do outreach on social media, but when me and Karina came together, we're like, no, we need to actually be out in the community, right? Like, how are we going to reach the people that may not have access to a Facebook page promoting this or, just a simple Google search, right? So we were like, okay, where can we go? We started, as you can see on the screen, we were at flea markets, we were at career days, where we were doing more outreach and we were just kind of being immersed in the community. And so one of our questions was like, where else can we go? And they had suggested powwows, basketball games, cultural events, Spirit Week at their school. Just kind of, they were like, if they see you, they'll be more comfortable, right? If you're there, they'll eventually talk to you, right? Which it did happen. We would go to the flea market and there'd be teachers like, oh, you guys are doing a good job. Or there'd be like moms or aunties are like, no, like I'm bringing my niece over here. They don't know what they want to do. So we'll just like talk to them. So our booth wasn't really about so much of recruiting teachers as much as it kind of became like dialogue and community, like engagement on just education in general. So we'll go into more about just even besides the interviewees, like some of the things that we've like really kind of like got feedback from the community on that. So we'll go to the next slide. Where is oh, okay. So what we're going to talk about is not only what the interviewees had said based off of the questions we kind of composed, but the purpose of our study, which Karina kind of went a little bit over, is like how can we do our job a little bit better, the context for our study, defining current landscape, the barriers, the challenges, the responsibility that was feedback of like what our higher ed programs that are educating the future teachers, like what do they need to know? How can they make their programs a little bit better? Increasing recruitment effectiveness, development and support and opportunities. So yeah.
Okay, so for the design and purpose, after we had gone out and been in communities, after we regrouped and started talking about where we want to go from here, the overall purpose for the study was to gain a better understanding of the environment of Native American teacher recruitment in tribal and rural communities. We then wanted to develop our own teacher recruitment model built for the communities that we were interacting with. And we want to respect their educational sovereignty and voice. Why is this work important? Within our NATPP program, we talk a lot about the 2018 Yazzie Martinez decision. And at the time in 2018, when they released the findings of fact, there were only 2% of Native American teachers in the public education system within New Mexico. And that was one of the, well, is the biggest difference between teacher population and student population. Student population within the public education system for Native American students is about 10 or 11%. It's still at that. And almost 6 years later, the number of Native American teachers has only risen by 1%. And so now there's 3% of Native American teachers within the state of New Mexico. And with that knowledge, we feel that it's critical to increase the number of Native American teachers. For our program, we're only in our second year of existence, and we want to approach our work with intentionality, and that's what led us to this research.
So the interviews, we wanted to identify like the leadership. So we kind of put our heads together of like in the office, like who would we want to interview? Who do we feel like could give us like so much knowledge based on all the years that they've worked, their positions and whatnot. So we identified 8 interviewees at first. So there were 2 superintendents, 3 educational community organizers, tribal educator director, a teacher, a district Indian education director, and we kind of based our questions on 4 different areas, which is defining the current landscape, identifying the barriers and challenges, increasing the Native American teacher preparation program, and like their effectiveness, identifying responsibilities of the higher ed, and the non-focused questions like how can teachers, like what is your dream of like a really good teacher? Like what is a good feedback? How can we kind of create this idea of what you're expecting out of a teacher, right? So yeah, go ahead, Karina. Oh wait, no, this is me. Okay, identifying the current, defining the current landscape. So the overall need was they just needed Native American teachers, right? And not only that, but the Native American administrators, because when you're going into a school, say, for example, that's like 50% Native, if not 98% Native American students, having an all non-native administrators or teachers, there could really be like a disconnect between the students and just the whole education that goes behind that of like they can see themselves in their teachers, teachers can see themselves in students, the relationship, those are really important to that we've understood. But also the specialized needs is in STEM. There's a lack of teachers in STEM, middle school, high school, special education was huge. Early childhood education, and then also trades like pottery, welding, plumbing, electricians, like those were all brought to our attention that there's a need for. And then also our targeted programs, which Karina will go into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So targeted programs are basically programs that were specifically tailored for the recruitment of Native American teachers and building those systems. Essentially what our interviewees were pointing to was that they didn't want to be fighting and in competition to access resources or consistent funding. They wanted to be supported and have their leadership be able to support their programs for the long run. When it comes to targeted programs, examples would be like our NATPP program is specifically tailored to increase the number of Native American teachers. But like other programs throughout the state might be internships where maybe high school seniors may be able to interact in an internship capacity within their school district to figure out if they even want to pursue teaching as a career. Other things might be targeted programs that support EAs or TAs to continue their journeys through higher education to get that license. And So programs like that, they want them to be targeted toward Native American teachers and to be supported consistently. They don't want to be in competition with other programs or have to fight for funding. Workload was an issue kind of as well. It was talked about by our interviewees in the sense that simply being an Indigenous teacher increases your workload. So you're highly utilized for your cultural knowledge. Maybe you're expected to put on some sort of extracurricular activity that is revolved around culture, but you're also highly sought out for in terms of being a cooperating teacher for those students who are going through the school system. So just your identity itself makes you go into a school system where your workload is very high. After we've done, of course, we're doing additional research within this, and I like to mention that all of these things here, for people who have been in the education system for years and years and years, many of these don't come as a surprise to anyone. And it really does show that these needs are persistent. Lastly, consistency. They really wanted consistency in administration and leadership, but this also meant consistency in state leadership. They also wanted consistent funding. Within this, again, we want to refocus from a negative mindset to a positive one. So areas of growth were attributed to targeted funding, student voice. Many students were saying, I want to see myself reflected in the classroom. And then specialized positions that directly focus on Indigenous education. So those, for example, would be like your Native American education directors or your tribal liaisons, people who focused on the Indigenous issues and elevated those within their district or school.
So next we have the barriers and challenges. So I'll talk about the social and competition. So social housing across the board, every single interviewee had talked about the lack of housing, whether it was they are not from that tribe and they don't have housing on the reservation, so they have to commute an hour to a half hour. The living expenses were expensive, or there's like competition for housing, just all of those things. But disparities were a big thing too when it comes to transportation. For example, there was a school where the commute was an hour in, and there may be services from the district where they provided a shuttle, but that's still like an hour ahead that you have to drive, get to school, work, and then an hour commute home. So that's just one of the examples. And also poverty, right? These students are coming from maybe areas where they're not being fed at home, or just all of that may be affecting the teachers. But also competition. So internal, in state, there's competition between schools. This one has a higher bonus, but this one offers healthcare. This one offers housing, or there's just all that internal competition. But also there's external competition, where we found out that Las Vegas was putting a down payment for houses for teachers. And so they're taking our teachers here from New Mexico, and Arizona has a good, bonus going on over there. And so there was just a lot of that going on when it came to competition of why there may be more teachers here and may not be here. So yeah, and Karina will talk about the others.
So the other barriers and challenges that we had they're all just kind of grouped together. Educational environment, cultural misconceptions and stereotypes, and of course the workload came up again. So one piece, the trauma aspect within educational environment, I do want to talk about because it was interesting to find out that they not only talked about trauma from a student not having being represented in the classroom, but also what I think we fail to recognize is that our students spend 90% of their life in the classroom from preschool all the way through 12th grade. And what they are very perceptive, and they notice the interactions that are going on in the classroom, and they notice the interactions that teachers may be having with their leadership and other teachers. So they talked a lot about how a student might not want to go into teaching because they see that their peers are giving their teachers a hard time, or their teachers are not being supported by administration, or that the parents are having or the teachers are having to deal with parents that might not be as supportive or something. So they see all the traumas that are going on in the classroom, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at the hands of their teacher, but it can be at the hands of their peers, at the administration, at all these people. So even the sense of trauma is multidimensional. One thing that I'd like to talk about within cultural misconceptions is parent support. So oftentimes we hear that people who work in administration or in education might say, there's no parent support. They're like, the parents are like, I can't even successfully meet with a parent. What our interviewees really, it was eye-opening to find out that they looked at it from a different perspective. They told us, when teachers come to our communities, what they might not realize is that how housing, employment are all located an hour or more outside of where we're at. And our students might be with their grandparents, and their grandparents might not have an understanding of everything that the student is going through academically. And while we might want parent support, sometimes we just can't have that because they do need to earn a living elsewhere. They do have to commute hours away. And that really deepened the understanding of what's truly happening at the school level. Workload, of course, it does take time and effort to reach these rural environments, commuting, and then there's a shortage of native cooperating teachers.
So next I'm going to focus on housing. So housing was the #1 thing that we identified in the interviews, but we did a consensus on like Zillow, on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. Although those are often places that were there's scams, we kind of focus a little bit more on Zillow, like how many rentals there are, how many houses available for purchase, the cost compared to the salary. And so this diagram on the right really reflects New Mexico. These are not the exact locations, and we're trying to keep those anonymous, but as you can see, we identified, like, are these rural areas, do they have a grocery store? Do they have a gas station? Sometimes gas stations in certain areas are the only place people can actually buy food that are local, if they're not growing it themselves. But then there's restaurants, and so, or there's a place like location C where there is 63 houses and 27 rentals, but if you look at the price, it's way more. It's not cost effective to become a teacher and make a decent living in that area, right? So we also have like the population, how many people live in these locations. On the right, you can see the housing compared to the national average. As in location A, it's 55% lower than the national average. And so we just wanted to get this kind of umbrella idea of what we're looking at when it comes to housing in rural areas, and how do we amplify this kind of understanding of why it may be hard for teachers to relocate and become teachers in these areas. So if we're identifying that housing is a problem and here it is. Hopefully we can find some solution in that later on, but this kind of gives us an idea what's happening here in New Mexico specifically.
Within the realm of like, the question was, what are the responsibilities of institutions of higher education? And this is really where we're starting to analyze the information and put it together to help others understand what exactly is needed when it comes to recruiting Native American teachers and structuring programs that create teachers that are compassionate and are qualified to work in rural Indigenous communities. One of our questions in this area was, how would your community and students in your community define a quality teacher? And we felt like this quote here really captured the heart of all of our responses. It's almost like incoming teachers need a training guide. They're not prepared to work with our students. And that was pretty eye-opening, but and it kind of communicated the gravity of the situation when it comes to higher ed. We've created this diagram on the side, and it's not complete, but we're organizing our thoughts around it. It represents the answers that we've collected, essentially. Some answers are more prevalent than others, and when organizing this, what you'll see is the biggest circle there is all focused on culture, cultural encouragement, cultural opportunities, culturally responsive, and cultural support. So this means that when we're looking at the internal circles, you want to view those all through a cultural lens. And I'll go through access and equity and multi-dimensional circles, and then Shereena will tackle emotional intelligence and systemically conscious. First, I'll do access and equity. And as you see, all the little words surrounding it, alternative scheduling, programs, part-time, online. What our interviewees want is for institutions of higher ed and other organizations as well to evaluate the cultural aspects of community, like what makes them who they are, what are their situations in life. And in our communities, what we often see is that our students are parents. Our students have whole lives in their communities. They may be an essential member of a multi-generational household where they contribute to the household in meaningful ways. To uproot them from that is kind of doing a disservice to them, honestly. And taking those situations and viewing them through a cultural lens, and then taking that and evaluating a program that maybe your college or university has, you then see that, okay, we do need alternative scheduling. We do need programs that are accessible. Maybe we can our scholarship programs can be more flexible when it comes to part-time funding. What kind of online programs do we have? And then applying this also in this multi-dimensional circle, our communities want educators to be able to utilize technology through a cultural framework as well. They would like for educators who come into their communities to be receptive to the culture, to engage within and participate in cultural events. They would like them to volunteer at cultural events as well. They also want institutions of higher ed to do a better job at distinguishing theoretical, practical, and experiential. So students who are going into schools, they would like for them to at least have the understanding that the theoretical knowledge that they've learned in teacher prep programs generally represent a dominant culture. And so when they go into a rural school environment, that's their experience will likely be very different.
So emotional intelligence was definitely a shock. It wasn't shocking, but when it was so voiced vocally, and many examples in our interviews about why it's important for us to acknowledge the emotional intelligence. We had teachers that had years of experience and gave examples of, like, you know, if there was a student with lice and they came in and their families hadn't taken care of it, do you send them home, or do you just, one of the teachers gave an example, she's like, I just put on my gloves and I help them out, you know? Understanding that some of these children have food insecurities, they may be from foster homes, they may have substance and physical abuse in the home. And like Karina said, sometimes these students are the adults. Sometimes they are the ones taking care of their younger siblings. So when it comes to compassion and understanding what's going on with the student, the individual student, do they have time to do homework when they go home? Or can there be a time set where you can help them? There was just so many examples, but when it comes to systemically conscious, we want teachers to be aware that just because you're learning something that is made and tailored to the United States as a whole, that maybe thinking locally and understanding what the needs are for the community may be a little bit more of a better approach rather than what has systemically been in place for the national, I guess, education system. And that maybe culture does need to be talked about. Maybe the testing and assessments, maybe there needs to be a different conversation about that. What is not being talked about in our higher institutions? What are the homework that you're setting for these future teachers? What's not in the books? What are in the books? How are we going to critically talk about these things in a higher institution to actually make a difference and to have a better understanding of what there are needs of and what there are lacking? So I will go to the next slide. And Karina and I wanted to make some sort of diagram image on increasing the recruitment effectiveness. So we kind of created this like pyramid, but wanted to have like a nature scene to it that kind of represents what we were looking at when it came to the 5 steps we've kind of sort of created and broke down. And so I'll explain that a little bit. We wanted water. Because water flows within everything, but it also comes back, right? Precipitation. And so we have the arrows that it's going this way, going that way. So just because they're numbered from 1 to 5, from bottom to top, doesn't mean that these are all in different levels, but they all are intertwined and they support each other. And so Karina will go into a little bit more into explaining why we came up with this.
Yeah. And I think that this there's one slide after this, I believe, but it really, it's a working model right now. What we're asking ourselves is, where does recruitment happen? How does it happen? And essentially, what conditions are needed for it to happen effectively? So we've kind of taken you through like the process that we've done through our interview questions. And this is kind of our working model for for how to approach this going forward. As we've been recruiting and as we've done our interviews, what we're seeing is that interest in the field of education for our communities happens at key moments. The first is at the end of high school, where students are evaluating what they would like to do for their careers. And this first moment, what we've seen on our side isn't very it's not often that we encounter a high school student who wants to go into teaching. And it's very, like, I don't know, for me, it makes me a little bit sad because I for other communities, sometimes I interact with several students who are like, I want to be a teacher, and I wanted to be a teacher forever. But when we're at these high school, college and career fairs, it's not very often that we have anyone come to the booth and is just like, I have wanted to be a teacher since I was in kindergarten. Like, it's almost never the case. What happens most often is that we encounter people who have become parents or have supported their family members in taking care of their children, and then realize that they have an ability, they enjoy taking care of children, whether in their parent capacity or an aunt capacity. They discover that it's something that they really enjoy. And then the third situation that we've encountered is that somebody starts working in a school. And there are intentional and unintentional pathways to this. Many times we encounter people who didn't intentionally go to a school. They found themselves within an educational environment, either as an EA, a substitute, or a teacher's assistant, and then by chance again discover that they're good at it and that they enjoy it. It brings them joy in life and they want to do this. And for all these moments, there are certain things that need to happen in order to propel somebody into actually becoming a teacher. And that's what this diagram essentially represents. We wanted something that would be a tool for evaluating environments that would apply to every single one of those moments. So at the bottom, we'll start with environment. And so when we're thinking of all those three situations that I described, is a student, for high school student, for instance, in a culturally competent and work and learning environment? Is the EA or TA, are they in a supportive learning environment? And are there opportunities to develop and encourage cultural identity? So feeling welcome within your school space is you're able to develop a more positive outlook of that space and want to remain in it. Number 4, experiences. So opportunities and pathways to discover an affinity for teaching. For that high school student, does the school system have an internship available where they're able to either like be inside a classroom working with their peers? Are there tutoring experiences available inside the classroom? For the EA and TA, that might be just like volunteer work or professional development. Are there opportunities to further themselves through experiences? Number 3, education and outreach. Where do people learn about becoming teachers? For me and Shereena, this is kind of where we see our program most interacting with people because we're inside their communities. We're not making them come to us. We're at the flea markets. We're at the cultural weeks at schools. We're, just at their local college and career fair that their high school put on. We're not taking them out of their place and making them come all the way to us every single time. And then for EAs and TAs, are they able to go, let's see, our higher institutions of higher ed coming to them to say, okay, these are our programs and this is how you can become a teacher while staying at home. Flexibility is a program or workplace structured for the student circumstances. I really love this one because we've had several schools tell us that their EAs and TAs are able to set aside 1 hour of their school day to take classes and do homework. And it kind of opened my eyes because we also have encountered the opposite end of that, where we've gone to communities and we're like, well, we've been able to, I've been able to finish my AA through my community college, and I'm ready to go tackle my BA and get my teaching license, but then I can't relocate. And I know that my administrator isn't going to support me if I want to take an online class. Like, it's all up to me. Like, I don't have support within my school system. And it's really sad when we encounter those situations because I mean, we work in higher ed and it feels like we just want to help everybody. And then lastly, support, building community and receiving cultural support and connection to home. We just got done with our program is currently in the midst of doing a video project, and we conducted an interview in Santo Domingo, Pueblo. And one of the teachers there said, I allow our EAs and TAs to do their online classes within my classroom. And I set out all kinds of like, I put out snacks for them. I set up a workstation for them. I let them know that if they have any project that they're working on, that I can be there for them. So really having somebody within the school system that's like, I'm rooting for you, I support you, I can create space for you. And just having that it's just motivational.
Okay, so within this, Karina, you did an amazing job explaining all of that because there's so much that needs to be talked about, and you did a good job consenting it. So, our overall goal really is to understand and just know that this is a work in progress, and this is something that stemmed from us wanting to do our job better, right? But now that we are like talking about it, bringing it to your attention, we would love a lot of feedback. We want to talk about like why the communities are so important, the community input. We just think that this is just the tip of the iceberg of the conversation that we can really communicatively build on and progress in this in our model. But go ahead, Karina.
Yeah, so we did create a list of all the things that we'd like to include. I think we have a really good set of diagrams that are going to help push this effort forward from here on. It's a research project that we'd still like to continue working on. We feel like the end result of this will be building something tangible and essentially a tool that organizations, institutions of higher ed, schools, and then programs like NATPP can refer to evaluate themselves and turn the eye inward and say, okay, are we doing all these aspects? What can we do a little bit better? What can our systems do better in order to strengthen the latter, I guess. And we also want to mention that this work is really focused within New Mexico. Our interviewees were from rural Indigenous communities. We haven't reached out to anyone in urban environments. So NATPP essentially wants students to be able to return to their communities and feel like they're ready and know that they're what their communities want from them. But with that, we'd love to open it to questions. Do you want to say anything else, Shereena?
No, but yes, we do. We're open to comments. We only have a little bit more time left, but input, if you don't get a chance to ask us, we have our emails here. You can email either of us and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. But with that, we would like to open it up to anyone who has questions. I see that there's a few in the chat. So let me respond to one of those. Cheryl had said, how possible will it be to develop workshops for middle school groups, extending to high school groups for students to be introduced to teaching careers? And I think this is, I'll start off, but I'll let Karina add on to this. But I think this is one of our ultimate goals too, is to just kind of put ourselves in situations where we can have these conversations. So this has come up when we were at the basketball games, like the state basketball games at the pit this past week or week and a half ago, where kids just kind of came up. We just want to be available and seen to where they have no problems asking these questions. Karina is really good with kids, by the way, and she has, said, how do you want to become a teacher? And like, they're just like maybe fourth to sixth graders or so, and they're just like, oh, maybe, just kind of sparking that into their minds that this is, we are here available for questions. But also in middle schools and high schools, we have gone to the high school day or the Native Student Day. I don't know exactly what it's called at the sub, where we set up where there was a bunch of high school students getting a chance to take a tour of the school and whatnot. And we just got to have the conversation with them and engage. There's been some opportunities, but it would be really cool to reach out more off campus as well. But Karina, if you want to.
We have done workshops for high schoolers and really brief ones, I think, for middle schoolers at this point. I think that sometimes workshops, I know Glennie did a really, really good one at Santa Fe Indian School. And another one that I feel like we had some good participation in was one that we did at the Sinai basketball tournament last year. And it was really hands-on, just like introducing students to the field of education, demystifying the process of becoming a teacher. That was something that I struggled with when I first started here at the College of Ed. I didn't know the pathways or anything, but I think, Shereena, if you go back to that diagram, the pyramid diagram, what we've seen from our interviews is that the experiences, that number 4 one, discover pathways to discover affinity for teaching, those are really where our interviewees pointed to the most opportunity. So not just doing like a single workshop, but having those maybe month-long internships for students to really interact with youth. We didn't have it in this presentation, but something that came up a lot was, and Shereena and I named it gateway jobs. So summer youth activities, things like that, Boys and Girls Club opportunities, reaching out to those specific organizations and increasing the opportunity for youth to interact in those capacities. For MA SOC, I tried to get on earlier with my phone. I got on late. I had a question. Yes. So our research only focused on New Mexico. It's not tailored to like a nationwide research or anything. It's specifically for rural Indigenous communities. If you're referring to NATPP, our scholarship program you don't have to be a New Mexico resident in order to apply to it. We'll definitely fund you. But our the resources that we provide are geared toward more like New Mexico licensure. Glennie, there are opportunities to work with middle and high school students. Yep, Santa Fe Indian School. We definitely went over there. Workshops. Yes, Lloyd, this is a tremendous amount of knowledge that needs to be shared with many people's communities and institutions. We felt like we hit the jackpot with this, honestly. Will both of us present in the future? We do